Good evening, everyone, from Vicarage Road for a rare episode of Samuel's Verdict after Norwich City beat Watford 2-1 in the first round of the Carabao Cup. Hopefully, you can all see and hear me. It's kind of a leap of faith at the moment. Unfortunately, your usual host, Connor Southwell, is at home at the moment, so you've got me for one night only from Vicarage Road to break down what I think was actually quite an important victory for Norwich City's season. Although obviously the magnitude of the game wasn't enormous, there are probably bigger things on the Canaries' agenda this season than the Carabao Cup, and to be honest, it feels unlikely that they go on and win it from this point. But after a 2-1 loss to Millwall to start off the season in the Championship, I think getting a win just on the board and producing the sort of performance that they did today would be really important for the dressing room confidence, for the feeling behind the scenes, and also for a few players who today I thought sort of put on a really good performance. So just quickly to take you through how things sort of broke down before we then go into some of the key topics and some of the important takeaways that Liam Manning will have had from the game. Norwich started off really, really well. I think it's also fair to say that Watford started very poorly. Norwich were pressing really high. They had a lot of space in the Watford half. They were moving the ball much better and finding space much better, creating a lot more potency in possession and finding their key players sort of on the edge of the box and able to sort of find those passes. One of the key moments when that happened was from their really high press, which I thought again was really impressive. Probably one of the rare strong aspects of that Millwall performance, and it was there again against Watford. Papa Amadou Diallo making his debut for the club, of course, won the ball from Ryan Andrews after a poor touch, drove into the box, produced a really high quality cutback for Josh Sargent when almost there was so much chaos going on around him. He was moving so fast. I think to pick out that pass to Josh Sargent was excellent. He had acres in the box, far more room than you should allow any Championship striker, let alone in my opinion, the best one, and he sweeps it home into the bottom corner. A really nice finish with his left foot, and Norwich were then in charge. You'd think Watford might have woken up at that point in their first home game of the competitive season and sort of given Norwich a little bit more to deal with, but they didn't really do that. Norwich were in control. They almost looked better after that goal. They were controlling the ball. They were dominating possession. And then they found the ball into Marcelino Nunez in midfield. He drove forward, had a shot, and I think we could call it a screamer, but I think it was probably more likely in the goalkeeper error column. I think Selbik basically just dropped the ball in his net. I don't really know what he was thinking. It was one of those, he had a full body, a full two hands right behind it, and it still somehow managed to squirm into the net. So I think that goes firmly in the mistake category, but I'm sure Nunez will certainly take that to kick off his season's tally. Norwich then looked really good for the rest of the half, created a few good chances, and maybe could even have been 3-0 up going into half-time. But then Watford sort of gathered themselves, collected themselves, came out a little bit different, as I think you'd expect. I think unless this was a mismatch of a Championship team against a League Two team or something like that, you would rarely see that sort of pattern continue into the second half. So the home fans were a lot more buoyed by a strong sort of first 10-20 minutes from Watford, and then late in the half they struck back, bar with a finish that, to be honest, I think standing goalkeeper Daniel Grimshaw again will be quite disappointed with. It came in at his near post and he wasn't able to clear it away, but it wasn't all his fault. It was also the defenders who I thought allowed Bar a really easy run on it. Sort of that side of Kellen Fisher and Jakov Medic in particular, not managing to deal with Bar as he stole into the box and produced that finish. And at that point, it did look like an uphill battle almost for Norwich to hold on to the scoreline that they had. Watford pressed higher up the pitch. They crossed balls into the box. They had a couple of really dangerous attacks where I'm sure Liam Manning had his heart in his mouth. But Norwich survived that period. And once it got to sort of 80, 85 minutes, they were pretty comfortable. They were able to collect themselves, as Watford did at half-time, get the ball under, keep possession, control things, and just kill time in that way, as well as try to provide a little bit of a threat on the counter. I think Jovan Makama was a really important part of that. I think everyone who I've spoken to about him or has spoken to me has been surprised by how physical he is, how big he is, and he fulfilled that role really, really well. I don't think he has maybe quite the presence or the quality just yet of Josh Sargent, and you can certainly allow that at his tender age of 21, but he really has that physical presence. He was chasing balls down, he was holding them up, and he was basically wasting a lot of time for Norwich in a really good way to sort of see the game out. And I thought from that point, Norwich actually looked pretty comfortable, saw it out really well, and defensively looked like the sort of side that I think we saw in pre-season and we're expecting to see against Millwall on Saturday. So it seems that they sort of collected themselves in that sense. And I think probably one of the positives when you look at that was actually the fact that Liam Manning didn't make too many changes from that team. I think 4 or 5 compared to Watford's 8. And I could see why he did it. I mean, you could say, it's only the second game of the season. You're kind of risking the fitness of these players. But after a Millwall performance that looks probably more disjointed than anything, I think it was very clear that this was a group of players that had 11 new additions, never played a competitive game before. I don't think that starting 11 had ever played before in any guise. And I think they needed to sort of improve that togetherness, that collective ability and that understanding between players. And I think that was definitely there. I think there was more connectivity between players when they were putting attacks together. They looked like players who had played together before, which was probably slightly different to that Millwall game. And I think that's one major positive. As I was saying, the fact that they had their backs against the wall for so long, sort of in the second half, I think there was probably a 15-20 minute period where most Norwich fans would have told you that Watford were looking quite likely to equalise and to take a positive result out of that. But they held firm. There was a lot of pressure. The home crowd came in behind their side at that moment. But Norwich, knew where to be. They kept cool heads. And that's probably testament to the defenders that they had. I thought Harry Darling again was really impressive. Jakov Medic, maybe a couple of poor moments, but largely much, much better than a pretty poor performance against Millwall. I thought Ben Krezene in that kind of hybrid centre-back, left-back role looked really good again. And to be fair to him, I think when we all saw his name in the back three for that NAC Breda friendly, we were kind of wondering why on earth that was. But in that hybrid role where he does a bit of defending, he gets out wide, he frees up Papa Amadou Diallo to go and do his thing, I think he can be really good. And I can't spend much more time without mentioning that man Diallo, because he was the standout player on the pitch for me, at least for the first half. He had so much pace, so much enthusiasm and so much urgency about his game that I really, really liked. He has that typical exciting winger's edge that I think fans love to see, and these fans who are sat just up to my left as I am now were absolutely delighted to see him on the pitch. There were several new chants invented about Papa Amadou Diallo this evening, and probably the reason why is because he was producing end product at the end of those runs. And how many times have we seen these wingers who have been really exciting, got you off your feet, and excited fans sort of in the final third, and then just not been able to kind of to deliver on it, basically. We've seen that so many times, but Diallo wasn't that, and I think the first goal actually kind of underlined that. As I said, there was the real quality right at the end to pick out Sargent for that finish. When there was a lot of things going on around him, and he'd done a lot of running, and had to deal with a lot to get to that point. To have the clarity of thought and the quality just to deliver that pass, I thought was outstanding. There were a couple of other moments. He had a long shot from distance that, to be honest, based on his performance to that point, I thought was headed for the top corner. As it turns out, it was probably headed for sort of row G or something like that. But you could see the desperation he had to make an impact. I think we saw that in the friendly against Breda as well, which was obviously the first time he was in a Norwich shirt, not too long after he played for the club, and you could see he was desperate to really show what he was about. There was one time he probably should have scored, a lovely 1-2 with Emiliano Marcondes. He sort of turned the defender and got on the inside on the left-hand side. Should have finished, but dragged it just wide. And I think that would have been the moment that kind of topped off a really excellent performance, but just wasn't quite to be. So he gave Liam Manning a bit of a headache going into Saturday. I think aside from him, probably the one who stands out to me is Kellen Fisher, because he was in that more aggressive wing-back role. And actually it was, although you'd say Ben Krezene is probably more of an attacking fullback than Fisher is traditionally, Fisher was the one who actually was driving forward a little bit more, and Krezene was kind of dropping back to allow Diallo to go and attack as much as he possibly could. And I thought Fisher actually got forward really, really well, even though he's slight. He's got that physical ability. He kind of knows how to use his body. He's got a bit of pace as well. And he got in behind a couple of times. He caused trouble for their defenders on the last line for Watford. And yeah, I think he's pushing claims to be in that right wing back role, even if Manning wants to kind of use that typical athletic up and down wing back as he has with Jack Stacey. I think we've been saying for a while, if he wants a kind of inverted, maybe more traditional, more defensive fullback, that Kellen Fisher is the man to do that. But I now think he might be in the conversation to be that aggressive right wing back as well. And I think Jack Stacey does the role broadly quite well, but probably I'd say on the ball, Fisher just has that little bit of extra quality that maybe he needs to add a little bit in the final third. But I think he has the ability, based on today, to play that role. And I think he's come on leaps and bounds in that sense. So I thought he stood out, even though there was maybe a difficult period for him when Watford were pressing forward and trying to get that equalising goal after they got one back. Aside from them, I thought Marcelino Nunez was quite good, stood out to an extent. Certainly in the first half, he was taking up some really good positions, found so much space. That was how he scored that goal, and probably called into question again why Norwich are open to selling him this summer. As we know, obviously he's in the final year of his contract now, and we all understand the implications that has value-wise. But I think he reopened the debate again today as to how important he can be for this team after missing out on the starting 11 for Millwall. Miko Topic again came off after at half-time, which you can understand. He's come in about 10 days ago now, and he's already played I think more than 100 minutes easily in a Norwich shirt, so you could understand why he was just being rested. But I thought he was pretty solid. Emiliano Marcondes, maybe not the most standout player on the pitch, but certainly solid, and showed why, if he doesn't leave this summer, there's absolutely no harm in that. And Oscar Schwartau, maybe not as involved again as you'd like him to be. He kind of does drift in and out of games, but he showed his physical prowess at times and helped Norwich get up the pitch, which was important. And then Josh Sargent up front. I think we all know his quality, and he underlined that with another goal today and a couple of other really important contributions. And of course, he will be starting on Saturday, as long as he's a Norwich player and as long as there are no fresh injury issues. Matej Jurasek also got on around the 82nd or 83rd minute. I think a couple of nice touches. One moment where he received a Makama knockdown, maybe could have moved the ball a little bit earlier, didn't quite have that urgency, but after sort of surveying the options around him, still found quite a good pass to Jeffrey Schlupp. Out on the left-hand side, Liam Gibbs with another stint. He's sort of another one of those players sort of on the fringes. But other than that, not really many standout performances to sort of speak of. I don't think, not too many particularly interesting substitutions. Although, as I said earlier, I thought Makama did a good job of holding the ball up, playing that traditional striker's role late on to help see out a result by keeping it, up there, holding it up, keeping it in a non-dangerous area of the pitch for Norwich. And I thought he did that quite well. So overall, quite a promising evening. Of course, Watford, as I said, did make 8 changes today, so you can't take loads and loads away from it. But I think for the morale and for getting the monkey off their back of the first win of the season, that was really, really important. Because, if they hadn't won this one, if they'd gone crushing out of the cup, and then you go into Portsmouth away, which, as we saw last year, is a difficult, tough grind away from home, I think that would have been, a bit of pressure. And even though obviously nothing gets decided in the first or second championship games of the season, and certainly nothing gets decided as it relates to championship promotion in the Carabao Cup first round, I think the feeling in a season where a strong start is really important would have been on the floor, to be honest, going into Portsmouth. So I think it was really important that they managed to grind out a result. You could sense that kind of relief from the players afterwards. And I think the fans were really loving it for the first time, obviously, in a while, when you consider it's been over 3 months now since the last competitive win for the club. So pleased for those 1,700 fans who travelled. Fair play for doing that in the Carabao Cup first round on a Tuesday night, to a ground that Norwich have been at 4 times since January 2022. You've got to give credit to those fans, and to be fair, Liam Manning did, Daniel Grimshaw did when I spoke to him afterwards. And that's probably a good segue into all of the other content that we've got across our channels. You can watch that Grimshaw interview, or you'll be able to pretty soon on this YouTube channel. And for all of the rest of our content, pinken.com/subscribe is the place to go. If you haven't already. Excellent value, as I always say, in my very biased opinion. Thank you very much for joining me for today's verdict. Hopefully, I've been an acceptable replacement for Connor Southwell, who I know is very, very good at this and very well loved. So you'll have him back soon. But thank you for joining me today, and yeah, we'll see you at Portsmouth.